Hello, everybody. My name is Daryl Gordon. I'm Vice President of Marketing at Medikeeper, and thank you for joining us today. Since 2018, Medikeeper has published an annual report that highlights trends that play a role in employee health and wellness. And today I'm very pleased to have Dr. Tyler Amell with us. He's the Chief Health and Strategy Officer at Medikeeper, and he's going to be sharing the 5 trends for 2024. He'll discuss how they were developed and the role that they play in employee health and wellness. The session is being recorded and will be available afterwards on our website. We're scheduled to run 25 minutes, and for Q&A sessions, please use the chat functionality at the bottom of your screen. Dr. Amell, we're looking forward to hearing about the trends for 2024.
Great. Thank you very much, Daryl. I appreciate it. And good morning to everyone from sunny San Diego. As Daryl mentioned, I am the Chief Health and Strategy Officer at Medikeeper, so full affiliations and disclosures, as is customary for our monthly webinars. I am also on faculty and the registrar at Pacific Coast University for Workplace Health Sciences. This is one of the few universities around that is solely focused on workplace health. So this is everything from primary prevention to health and wellness, health promotion, risk reduction strategies to occupational health, occupational medicine, and into the work disability management. So sustainable return to work and stay at work programming and that sort of stuff. So everything to do with workplace health. So we're quite excited about that university. I'm just reviewing the master's application, actually. So if there's anybody out there looking to do a master's in a very specific degree, this could be something of interest to you. I'm also fortunate enough to sit on the executive boards of the National Wellness Institute as well as the Work Wellness Institute. And my LinkedIn handle is there. Feel free to reach out. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I promote an awful lot of research in the broad field of workplace health and productivity. So if you're looking for guidance for practice and these sort of things, it'd be great to hear from you. Feel free to reach out, or if you want to send me an email, my email is there as well. So thank you so much. Now, as is customary in these webinars, I usually do a quick recap of recent conference presentations and keynotes and plenary sessions, as well as what's coming up in the near future. Now, we happen to be in that little lull in conference season, heading into the holidays, where there's not a lot of big conferences going on. So, my next one is actually not until February. I'm working on a few other events to be scheduled in and around there as well, but that hasn't been finalized yet. So, very, very active conference season this year, particularly in August and September. There's a lot of good events. And of course, I use some of the experience in creating these keynotes and plenary sessions, as well as conversations with employers to help frame our trends for 2024. And I also look at the Medikeeper customers with regards to where their pain points are, what are they struggling with, how is technology helping them, and or even services above and beyond that. So sort of take all these disparate elements together and of course look at the data within the Medikeeper platform to help frame what the trends are, or what we believe they will be in 2024. So that's something that sort of highlights our process when it comes to doing this. One of the things I love about my job is getting to have all these conversations, particularly with HR leaders in organizations or insurance folks who are underwriting a lot of the workplace health plans, group benefit strategies, and those sort of things, because they have a unique insight into what's going on, and that ultimately having conversations directly with workers. I was given a talk in Las Vegas in September a few weeks ago, and one of the workers who was actually supporting me giving the talk came up to me and was asking me questions about his workplace health issues that he was having and stuff like that. And so I was asking him a lot of questions as well. It was fascinating, and really appreciate those types of conversations as well, because you really hear what is going across a lot of frontline employees' minds, because this is quite important to setting the tone and direction with regards to investments into protection and promotion of health in the workplace. So it's very, 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 very useful in that perspective. So, with regards to our trends and where we think things are going to go here in the next year, we've come up with five, which are currently on the screen. And the first one is engagement doesn't matter, and that's by design to be a little bit provocative. And the reason why this is so is because engagement means different things to different people. And those of you who know me for a while will know that I share this one story all the time. I was giving a talk in San Francisco at the Integrated Benefits Institute's annual summit, and I was given a talk. It was one of the smaller sessions, smaller than today's actually. There's only about 100 people in the room, and it was split between human resources professionals and health promotion and health and wellness people. And employee engagement is this very entrenched metric. It's extremely well used across organizations throughout the world, and particularly here. And of course, this is related to discretionary effort. It's, job satisfaction. It's people going above and beyond and really, wearing the role that they play within an organization with pride and being that person whose go-to is dependable and all these sort of things. And, that's how we measure engagement. There's a few different engagement indexes out there that provide really accurate a sentiment analysis with regards to what is going on, reflective in the culture of that organization and everything related to that. And then there's health and wellness people who think of engagement as it relates to participation, not necessarily fully aware of that broader employee engagement sort of drive. And this was quite evident in this session that I was giving, because the topic was health engagement and productivity, and how you can't have engagement and productivity in the workplace without a foundation of health. If people are struggling for their own health or for their family or loved ones, it's quite difficult to concentrate on going above and beyond in the workplace. And so it became evident due to a couple of questions being asked that people on the HR side of the room knew exactly what we were talking about and linking these elements together, but people who were thinking of participation didn't necessarily have that same sort of understanding. So I stopped the presentation, and I was presenting with two other people as well. And so we did a little bit of a rundown and did a straw poll and tried to figure out, who was thinking what. Because honestly, I grew up in HR, and employee engagement was something that we talked about and measured about quite consistently. But it's very interesting to hear these different perspectives. So this layers in this concept of this human resources approach versus the human wellness approach. Now, why is this important? Well, if we're using it as a surrogate for people participating, then we have to be quite hesitant or straightforward in our understanding that participation is the key. And so, if we're looking at this concept and measuring participation in a well-being initiative or a wellness strategy, obviously the number of people who are actively engaged in that health improvement journey, as measured by folks accessing educational content, signing up for events, if you have a digital solution, engaging with the platform, and so on and so forth, are good surrogate measures for this. Now, I've been doing research in this space for a very long period of time, so I've seen very, very high levels of participation, and I've also seen very, very low levels of participation. A lot of it has to do with plan design and making sure that it's aligned with the culture and making sure that it's aligned with what people are looking to achieve. Now, you could have, let's say, an engagement rate or participation rate of 60% in an organization, which is quite a high number, and people should be quite happy to see that. But if the level of engagement and level of participation in those people is almost everybody who is already on a health improvement journey or who's already bought into the need for improvements in their lifestyle choices and behaviors, well, then you're not necessarily going to get the best outcomes, because you're dealing with arguably a healthier population to begin with. And so we believe that this is something that should be back on the radars again for 2024, simply because we have to make sure that we're targeting the correct population. So targeting participation is really what matters. And that is really those most at risk, because that's the people who have the most to gain through investments in their own health and well-being by adopting the lifestyle behaviors that we know are going to contribute to a risk reduction in terms of their health status. So these are adopting behaviors such as, improving diet. So we know that the quality and the quantity of food is one of the most important aspects of health and well-being. In fact, probably a little bit more important than physical exercise based upon the research. But physical exercise, of course, is important on it to its own. There's the huge amount of benefits associated with that, and then of course smoking status and sleep. These are primary drivers for your own well-being. And so targeting those individuals, firstly identifying members of the population who belong to that group, and then engaging them on a health improvement journey to initiate and sustain that over time is really what we should be talking about, and not these broad measures of participation above and beyond, because we could be missing it. So if we go back to that example of 60% of the population, and 55% of those people in total, in terms of raw percentages, are individuals who are already on that journey, well, then you're really only getting a few people who are truly most at risk and who have the most to gain from these elements. So our strategy must be twofold. It must be to sustain people where they're at, who have already engaged in a health improvement journey, and targeting and identifying those and supporting those individuals who are most at risk. And that's really where the conversation should be. That'll enhance the return on investment, which is a common question we get from employers. It'll also enhance the value on investment measures as well. So, we believe that 2024 has the potential to really open up and really get people to target the right audience, and to help get some much better, more sustainable outcomes when it comes to this, while focusing in on that particular aspect of the population. So we realize it's provocative, but we think it's definitely time to do this sort of thing. Now, next up is employee burnout is not going away anytime soon. This has been on the list for a few years now. I myself have been speaking on the topic of mental health and its relationship to health and productivity for a while, since well before the pandemic. But we also have a lot more employers out there who are engaged in protecting and promoting the health of their people to a much more significant degree than we've ever seen before. And the mental health crisis, just as we see with the climate crisis, these things aren't going away anytime soon. They're going to continue to be significant issues for those with an interest in workplace wellness and workplace health and productivity to address. Now, when it comes to burnout is a syndrome that results from workplace stress that's not been successfully managed, and we essentially have three dimensions. So feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion is number one. And this is quite important, because the WHO, the World Health Organization, has recognized as of a couple of years ago that this is a significant workplace health issue. Before, stress was something that we didn't necessarily pay as much attention to as we probably should have. But fortunately, that's changed. Now, this energy depletion thing is something I like to focus in on a lot, because people can relate to it. Most of us have cell phones, and we get a fair bit of battery anxiety, just like those of you who drive electric vehicles, with regards to how much you can actually go before you need a recharge. When you think about the workday, we've got 24 hours in a workday. If you're getting the recommended amount of sleep, you should be targeting, between 7 and 8 hours, probably closer to 8 hours. But many people don't do that. In fact, you've got close to 40% of the population that doesn't actually get that. So we have a cohort of people who aren't necessarily getting the right amount of sleep. Then if you factor in an 8-hour workday for 5 days out of 7, if you're on a conventional schedule, that's leaving around 8 hours of time for personal duties and these sort of things. So what we really need to do is to renew our energy, to recharge during that time period on a daily basis, and then of course during the weekends, and then of course when you factor in vacations and PTOs and those sort of things, we should be able to rebound quite nicely. But if we think about it with our cell phone analogy, we carry those things around. And if your battery's running low, and you're expecting an important phone call, or you have to join a webinar, you could be scrambling to find a battery pack, or maybe you're even traveling with a portable battery. I know I started doing that as well, because my cell phone batteries were being depleted. Plus, the older the phones get, the less they hold their charge, so they don't necessarily hold the charge for as long as they should, and the battery gets depleted. So our bodies are very much the same, are very much in the same way, in the sense that we need to recharge, we need to unplug, we need to be able to rebound. Otherwise, we get worn down over time, and this can impact things. So you can increase the mental distance from your work, negative negative feelings, cynicism about the job, and really reduced professional efficacy, so reduced productivity and these sort of things. So there's a whole host of problems that go along with burnout, and these numbers are going in the wrong direction quite readily. We're not necessarily capitalizing on the ability to recharge the way that we should, because the stresses and everything of daily life are just piling up on us. And this is a problem for organizations, from a couple different perspectives. When people are at work and engaged, from a productivity perspective, presenteeism can impact it. And these are people who are at work but not necessarily as productive as they should be. Of course, we've got issues with absenteeism, and then longer duration leaves, absence episodes that are sanctioned in that sense. And then, of course, disability, from a short-term disability, long-term disability, and maybe even from a workers' comp perspective. And then we've got all these other aspects: our pharmacy spend, our medical spend, our extended health benefits. These sort of things are all common surrogates that we look at. Now, when we start to thread everything together, we see that burnout is a substantial risk to many organizations. So it's something that organizations should be looking at in order to better protect and promote the health of their people, because that's what people are looking for these days. And quite frankly, it's a really good business strategy. Now, when we look at inflation, of course, we have inflation. We have a housing crisis. We've got food security. We've got food costs going up. People are finding it difficult to truly engage in the workplace if you're having trouble making ends meet. And inflation is driving this, is driving a decrease in engagement levels. And then, of course, we do have the stress, anxiety, burnout, and depression. So the other aspects of mental health. And then not only do we draw the line on mental health, but then we have to add in physical health as well, because these two are related to one another. People are under a significant amount of stress. You could see gastrointestinal problems, you could see chronic pain issues, and these sort of things. It's a rich tapestry between the physical health and mental health, and you can't really separate them. So we truly believe that this is something that absolutely needs to continue to be on the radar for organizations with an interest in health and productivity at this point, simply because everything is going in the wrong direction once again. And so protecting and promoting that is in everybody's best interest. Now, the next item that we believe is going to be quite important is the artificial intelligence aspect. So about a year ago, ChatGPT was released at the end of November of 2022. There's some neat things that can be done. I myself have tested it. I signed up for an account almost within a couple of days of its release. I've tried it. I've tested it out. It does provide some interesting foundational work, if you will, but it's not necessarily fully vetted and fully applicable to the things that we would like to use from a workplace health and wellness perspective. Now, one of the issues that I have, and I actually published a couple of different papers on this with a few colleagues of mine, is that there's a lot of smoke and mirrors out here. There's a lot of marketing issues, if you will. There's a lot of vendors who claim to be using artificial intelligence or machine learning, but in reality aren't. They're just employing their algorithms, which are very much not machine learning. But a lot of people, they sort of get caught up in that marketing and the smoke and mirrors, and don't necessarily ask the right questions. So I would certainly advise organizations, if you're looking at using these types of solutions, to really ask those questions. Is it true AI, or is it just a fancy algorithm? And these are fundamental questions, and a much more informed consumer, whether it be an employer or a health plan, will definitely help support the use of these things going forward. Now, when it comes to AI, really what we're talking about here are techniques that enable the computers and the machines to mimic human behavior. So mimic your thinking. So it's really much above and beyond. So if you type in something into ChatGPT saying, build me a wellness program, it's going to rely on its training elements to sort of put a foundation in place. You're still going to need to tweak it, but there are some good elements in place there. But it's a little bit different than an algorithm, which is just going to go through the motions, which is something that we would use, let's say, in a health risk assessment. So when you layer on that type of sequence for an algorithm, and then you layer on some learning on top of that, that a machine can maybe learn from your behaviors or your habits or these sort of things and drive that, well, then that is something that is quite meaningful, and it's actually using AI. Now, machine learning is part of artificial intelligence, and that really gives the computers the ability to learn without being programmed to do so. So this is a fascinating aspect, because these are examples of machines that are beginning to learn on their own. We're still not there. We don't really have that full capability yet, but we're getting better and better. In 2024, we're going to see some pretty significant advancements. So we obviously have a long ways to go in terms of using this. Now, whenever I work with organizations on understanding the potential applicability from a health perspective, I always put it through the lens of, this is something that can be used to augment your own knowledge. It can start a foundation for you to build upon from a health and productivity perspective, a wellness perspective. You can target personalization, health risk, navigation, workflows, behavior change, and support those sort of things. But it's not without its weaknesses. There's significant bias in the training of the AI components. There's ethical considerations. There's privacy issues. And even the accuracy of the information. They're only as good as the training material consumed. So it's just like yourself. If you went through a training program or a micro course or micro learning, and the material is wrong, you could end up with making the wrong decisions when it came time to apply that knowledge. And the exact same thing happens when machines are learning. If they learn bias, and of course we see that quite readily in a lot of the ones that we're seeing in healthcare right now, they're not necessarily producing the best outcomes. Next up is the concept of remote and hybrid work. This is something that has been around for a few years now. It was around prior to the pandemic. It obviously accelerated during the pandemic, but this is something that employees are looking for. They want this type of arrangement. There's research into fully remote people, being more engaged and more productive than people who are fully in the office. And of course, this is only for organizations that have that capacity, right? You can't do this in frontline healthcare service. You can't do this in frontline services, transportation. An airline pilot can't work remotely by any stretch of the imagination. Same thing with frontline nurses and healthcare. But there is a substantial portion of the population that can work remotely, and whether or not they're fully remote or in a hybrid sense, it depends a lot upon the receptivity of the organization for this sort of thing. Now, the employees are quite clear in their desire to continue to work remotely or hybrid. If you look at the research, the optimal hybrid environment is probably 2 days, a maximum of 3 in the office. The rest working from home or working from an alternative location. Some are still fully supportive of complete remote work. Obviously, you save a lot on commercial real estate, and that's where you see a lot of the pushback with regards to these types of strategies is coming from the folks who own those office buildings and lease them out to organizations. They're tired of running at a loss, so they're promoting everybody to get back into the workplace. When research shows that if you look at productivity, and certainly from a health perspective, people are better off working remotely or from a hybrid perspective. And you do get higher levels of employee engagement as well, which is quite fascinating. We get lower levels of engagement for people in the office and higher whenever they're remote. Now, self-reported productivity, of course, this is something that is reported to be quite high, but again, that's self-reported. Empirical data on reporting on productivity for folks who are working remotely is something that actually underscores and supports that concept as well. So, I reviewed a study that was done in Texas not that long ago, where they actually looked at people writing computer code. So these are computer engineers, developers, and their productivity in a remote sense was far greater than it was whenever they were in the office. And this is empirical. So this is code and accuracy of code and those sort of things. So there's some very cool research projects that have been done in this sense. Now, the last trend for 2024 that we think should be on people's minds is this concept of the 4-day work week. And this is fascinating. Again, it can only be applied to certain populations, but it is something that generates an awful lot of conversation on what the future of work can look like. And then when you layer on the health aspects, it's actually extremely interesting. I've given a few talks and keynotes on this one based upon a review of all the disparate pieces of research evidence out there, and absolutely fascinating. So what you're seeing on the screen right here is very cool image depicting the amount of GDP per hour worked, and this is global. So this is a very large study, and looking at the fact that the longer people work, the less productive they are, and this has been replicated in countless other studies as well. There's a sweet spot in and around this 1,400 to 1,600 to the low end around the 1,800 hours a year, and then once you go beyond into the 2,000 hours, 2,200, 2,400, the data become increasingly clear that productivity just drops off a cliff. So this isn't something that organizations should be looking for, and it's something that is replicated in the research a fair bit. So this is part of the rationale behind getting organizations to where it's applicable to start thinking about this, because perhaps this is something that we could do to help address burnout, to help address stress, to help address a few things. Now, the research, when it's done, it operates under the premise that people deliver 100% of the productivity at 80% of the time. So in a conventional 5-day work week, each day is 20% of the week in that sense. Take one of those off, and you end up with 80%, but at 100% compensation. And that's where a lot of organizations have a tough part, because they really want to dial back the comp, which doesn't make any sense at all. And I'll show you a slide on that in a moment as we wrap this up. Now, when we look at the 4-day work week, and the reason why we believe it should be on people's radars is if we're serious about addressing mental health issues, rust out, burnout, these sort of things, it's quite clear when you look at a figure like this, and this is a very classic figure that shows a level of stress versus performance, is that, a little bit of stress is good for you. A lot of stress is very, very bad for you. No stress, is, people are bored, they're calm, but you have the opportunity to improve. And then there's that optimal performance zone where people who have that positive stress, something we label eustress, people get stuff done, they're energized, work feels effortless and these sort of things. But the moment those stressors start to pile up, then you see fatigue, you see exhaustion, you see the health, you see the breakdowns and the burnouts. And unfortunately, we see an awful lot of that these days. And that's quite problematic for a lot of workforces. Now, the research into the 4-day work week is extremely powerful. We see decreases in worker burnout. We see increased productivity and output. We see improvements in employee retention and recruitment, obviously saving on overhead expenses and benefits to the environment and these sort of things. And plus, when you look at inflation, the housing crisis and food inflation these days, having the ability to do a little bit more with that same level of compensation is quite powerful for a lot of folks. And then the next question, of course, from employers, whenever I talk with them about this, was, well, how are we going to pay for this? This doesn't make any sense. Why can't we just dial back the amount of a compensation? Well, there's a tremendous amount of elasticity in the system. From World War II till around 1979, 1980, wages increased with productivity. So both the worker and the workplace benefited rather significantly as improvements were made over time. Now, in 1980, of course, we had trickle-down economics, all these tax cuts and things like that, which have proven to be something that was an absolute disaster. But we tend to look at this through this lens through 2023, and we see this huge gap between the hourly pay, so the compensation elements, and productivity. So there's an awful lot of capability in the system to be able to afford to dial back the hours while maintaining compensation and maintaining productivity without anybody losing here. So, and this is one of my favorite slides. I use this a fair bit in conversations as of late. So very, very happy, to share this. Definitely appreciate your interest in today's conversation. There's a white paper that Daryl mentioned that's going to be released momentarily, where I dive deeply into each one of these concepts and provide some of the research evidence. So appreciate your time and attention today, and definitely forward to seeing you again in future webinars.
So Dr. Mill, as always, we've run up against time. I keep on saying we need to make these a 1-hour session. You've given us some really interesting food for thought. And just to follow up on Dr. Mill's comment, everyone will be sent a copy of the white paper and this webinar. If you would like to refresh yourself, we'll be back on the website. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate your time. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.